The kick lasted exactly 1.3 seconds, just over a single heartbeat. But that fraction of time would go down in martial arts history as one of the most physics-defying moments ever recorded. Tanaka Yuki, a towering force of 450 pounds and nearly 6 feet tall, had never been knocked down. She was the heaviest female sumo wrestler in recorded history, a champion who dominated the ring for 8 years with 247 consecutive victories. Bruce Lee, by contrast, weighed 135 pounds. But in September 1970, in Ryogoku Kokugikan, Tokyo, their worlds would collide in a way no one could have predicted. The Japanese Sumo Association had organized an unprecedented exhibition, East Meets West, meant to pit traditional Japanese martial arts against foreign fighting systems. Purists grumbled. Allowing non-sumo fighters into the sacred ring violated centuries of ritual. But television networks had promised funding, and the association needed money for renovations. The stage was set, controversy included. Originally, Bruce was supposed to face a karate champion, but 3 days before the event, that fighter withdrew due to injury. Desperate to save the headline attraction, producers approached Yuki with an unusual proposal: face Bruce Lee in an official match. For Yuki, who had grown tired of critics questioning women's sumo, the offer was irresistible. She accepted immediately. For Bruce, however, the idea of a 135-pound man fighting a 450-pound woman seemed like a potential PR disaster. Yet, after learning her credentials, her competitive spirit, and the promise of a fair fight under legitimate combat rules, he agreed. The weigh-in was dramatic. Yuki stepped on the scale, 450 pounds exactly. Media gasped filled the arena. Bruce followed, 135 pounds. The contrast dominated front pages the next morning. At the press conference, journalists asked Bruce how he planned to compete. His answer was elegant and scientific. Weight is just one variable. Momentum, leverage, and proper application of mechanical principles matter more. A 450-pound mass moving slowly has force. A 135-pound mass moving with maximum velocity at the optimal angle can generate comparable impact. Physics doesn't care about fighting styles or size. It only responds to correct application. Yuki, curious rather than offended, asked him to explain the concept of the optimal angle. They spent 30 minutes together, discussing biomechanics, weight distribution, and the hidden forces behind striking power. For the first time, Yuki considered principles that went beyond brute strength and sumo technique. The encounter set the stage for something extraordinary, a fight that would be as much about physics as martial skill. When September 15th arrived, Tokyo's unusual heat did nothing to dampen the energy inside the Kokugikan. 11,000 fans filled the arena. Yuki entered with full sumo ceremony, shiko stomps, salt throws, traditional formalities. Her massive arms, tree trunk legs, and kesho mawashi apron announced her as a champion. Bruce's entrance was simple but commanding. Black pants, no shirt, defined musculature. Though less than a third her weight, he radiated discipline and power. The rules were simple: standing combat, striking allowed, winner determined by knockout, submission, or ring out. The referee raised his fan, signaling the start. Yuki advanced first, unleashing rapid tupari palm thrusts, her 450-pound mass amplifying their impact. Bruce moved with controlled lateral footwork, gathering data rather than retreating. Every motion of Yuki's massive frame gave him clues: how her weight shifted, how her center of gravity committed, how momentum flowed. Yuki attempted a Nodawa throat push and a mawashi grip, trying to lift or overpower him. Bruce dodged, deflected, and calculated. He allowed himself to be cornered, letting her control space for a few critical seconds. Every thrust, every step, every ounce of Yuki's incredible mass was feeding him the final data point he needed.
And then, in the blink of an eye, the stage was set for the impossible.
The Kokugan was alive with tension, 11,000 eyes fixed on the ring, but even in the deafening roar, Bruce and Yuki existed in a world of their own. Seconds stretched, though only moments had passed since the referee's fan signaled the start. Yuki, a mountain of strength, took the initiative. Her Tupari strikes, rapid, alternating palm thrusts, slammed forward like pistons, each one capable of knocking a man off balance. Her 450 pounds of concentrated force was intimidating, even to seasoned sumo veterans. Bruce's approach, however, was unconventional. He didn't step back, didn't flinch. Instead, he moved laterally with fluid precision, studying every nuance of Yuki's technique. How did she shift her weight when thrusting? When she committed forward, how quickly did her massive legs realign to stabilize her center of gravity? Where did her balance falter under the momentum of her own mass? Every step, every breath, every subtle adjustment of her stance was data for Bruce. He wasn't just defending, he was mapping physics in motion. Yuki sensed the unusual calm in her opponent. Most fighters would have cowered or rushed recklessly against someone of her size, but Bruce's presence was almost serene. She adapted, cutting off his angles, closing the ring space, forcing him toward the perimeter. Every move she made was textbook sumo. Control the center, establish grip, use mass advantage. Yet Bruce was not only surviving, he was observing. The crowd gasped as Yuki executed a Nadala thrust, extending her arm fully toward Bruce's neck. With a subtle shift of his body and a precise Tan Sao deflection from Wing Chun, Bruce redirected the force just enough to avoid impact. Yuki's forward momentum carried her slightly past optimal position. This was the first critical moment. Bruce could have struck, but he chose to wait. Timing, he knew, would be everything. Next came the Mawashi grip attempt. Yuki lunged to clasp Bruce's waist, intending to lift and throw him. Her enormous hands grasped nothing but air. Bruce's footwork kept him perfectly mobile, subtly weaving through the ring while maintaining observation of her biomechanics. The crowd leaned forward, sensing the tension. Here, in these early exchanges, Bruce wasn't just fighting, he was analyzing. Yuki switched tactics. She adjusted her strategy, gradually cutting off space and testing Bruce's reactions. The rapid Supari barrage followed, hands moving like pistons, alternating palm strikes fired at maximum force. Bruce absorbed a single blow on his forearm, not defensively, but as a sensor. The slight rocking of his body provided invaluable feedback. The force distribution, the timing, the angle of Yuki's committed weight. That single touch gave him everything he needed to calculate her structural vulnerability. The audience didn't notice the tiny shift in Bruce's demeanor. His eyes tracked the subtle adjustments in her stance, the breathing rate, the timing of her commitment. Yuki, despite her size, was exerting massive cardiovascular effort. Her breathing was slightly elevated. Bruce, conditioned to perfection, maintained calm and steady inhalation, conserving energy while letting her show him the physics of her mass. And then, almost imperceptibly, the pace changed. Bruce's lateral footwork halted. His eyes locked onto a specific point on Yuki's forward leg, just above the knee, where her structural balance was momentarily weakest. The data he had gathered over the past few seconds crystallized into a plan. Every pivot, every subtle shift, every forward thrust had pointed to this micro-moment. Physics had revealed its secret, and Bruce was ready to act. What followed next would only last a heartbeat, yet it would echo through martial arts history. The 1.3-second kick that defied size, expectation, and common sense had been meticulously calculated from these opening exchanges.
But first, Bruce needed to close the distance, synchronize with Yuki's commitment of mass, and rotate his body with perfect torque to deliver the strike at maximum efficiency. Every inch mattered, every second counted. The arena held its collective breath, unaware that history was about to unfold before them. 11,000 spectators waited to witness not just a contest of strength and skill, but the ultimate demonstration of physics in motion.
Bruce Lee took 3 deliberate steps forward, closing the gap that conventional wisdom said should never be crossed. Most would have kept distance, respecting the raw mass of 450 pounds moving toward them like an unstoppable boulder. But Bruce had spent these first precious seconds observing, calculating, and understanding the physics of Yuki's motion. Every thrust, every shuffle of her feet, every ounce of her weight committed forward had given him a window, a fraction of a second where her structure could be compromised. Step 1. Position. His left foot planted firmly, body angled sideways to Yuki. Step 2. Chamber. His right knee rose toward his chest, core engaged, hips starting a precise rotation. Step 3. Unleash. Torque ran through his entire kinetic chain, from the planted foot, through his legs, into his hips, spiraling to his extended heel. The spinning back kick was a technique Bruce had refined for years, not relying on brute leg strength alone, but on whole-body rotation, synchronized with timing and precision. Every muscle, every tendon worked in perfect harmony. His eyes, sharp and focused, aimed not at her chest, not at her face, targets instinctively chosen, but at the forward leg just above her knee. This was the weak point, the structural support that carried the weight of 450 pounds when committed in forward motion. Physics dictated the outcome. Bruce merely applied the formula. The impact was instantaneous and catastrophic. Yuki's forward momentum combined with the exact force of Bruce's strike. Her knee buckled, not broken, not injured, but mechanically compromised. Her massive frame, never before toppled, succumbed to the laws of motion. She fell forward, arms instinctively bracing against the clay ring, her hands slapping the surface in trained motion to minimize injury. For the Kokugan audience, the moment seemed frozen in disbelief. 11,000 witnesses watched a 135-pound man topple a 450-pound champion. The referee, fans still raised, stared, stunned. 3 sumo grand champions in the front row sat mouths agape. The commentators went silent, struggling to narrate the impossible. This was not luck, not a gimmick. It was the perfect intersection of skill, physics, and timing. Bruce stepped back immediately, bowing respectfully to Yuki. He acknowledged her skill, her power, and the centuries of sumo tradition. Yuki remained on the ground, not in pain, but in shock, having never experienced the sensation of being knocked down. Slowly she sat up, then stood, showing no lasting injury beyond a slightly reddened knee. Her expression, initially astonished, gave way to respect. The impossible had happened, and both fighters knew they had witnessed something that transcended ordinary combat. The official announcement: Bruce Lee, winner by knockout. The crowd's response was a mix of confusion, awe, and excitement. Applause rippled unevenly, some uncertain, some thrilled, all astonished. On live television, one veteran commentator remarked, "I have watched sumo for 40 years. I have never seen anything like this. Size was supposed to be absolute in sumo. What we just saw violates everything we understand." Backstage, Yuki sought Bruce out. Through a translator, she asked the question every martial artist dreams of asking: how? I have never been knocked down. I have fought men weighing 400 pounds who could not topple me. You weigh 135 pounds. One kick? Bruce demonstrated using a training dummy. Your weight is both your asset and your vulnerability.
You commit your 450 pounds forward. Your own mass becomes the force when structure is removed at the exact micro moment. Timing and angle, not strength alone, decided the outcome. He showed her the subtle positioning, the rotational torque, and the microsecond timing. Yuki listened, absorbing principles that extended beyond sumo into physics and biomechanics. For her, it wasn't defeat, it was insight. For Bruce, it was the ultimate demonstration of what mastery, observation, and understanding could accomplish. That single kick, lasting only 1.3 seconds, became immortalized. High-speed footage, later analyzed by Japanese sports scientists, revealed Bruce's heel velocity exceeding 50 feet per second, generating an estimated 1,100 pounds of concentrated force, delivered at the precise angle to disrupt structural support. It was a textbook lesson in the power of precision, timing, and biomechanics. The world had seen something impossible. Physics had spoken. Bruce Lee had proven that technique, understanding, and timing could transcend size. And Yuki, the undefeated champion, now carried a new respect for principles that could turn her own mass into a tool rather than just raw power.
The Kokugan was still buzzing hours after the fight, but backstage, a quieter drama unfolded. Yuki sat on a simple bench, breathing deeply, processing what had just occurred. She had faced countless opponents in her 8-year career, men and women alike, yet none had toppled her, not even those weighing near her own colossal 450 pounds. And now, a man less than a third of her weight had done what seemed impossible. Bruce approached her, calm and measured, and bowed respectfully. "You fought brilliantly," he said, his tone sincere. "Your technique, your control, and your timing, everything was textbook sumo. I only used what physics allowed me to exploit." Through the translator, Yuki's voice trembled slightly with a mixture of awe and curiosity. "Explain again. How did you do it? I want to understand, not to challenge you, but to learn. My training is strong, but this changed everything I believed." Bruce smiled, seeing the same spark in her eyes that drove him every day to refine his craft. He took a small training dummy and demonstrated the mechanics, how her own mass, when committed forward, created a momentary vulnerability in her structure. The angle of his heel, the rotation of his hips, the precise timing of the strike, it wasn't brute strength, it was applied science. "You see," he explained, "your forward leg locks when you commit your weight. At that moment, it's supporting your entire mass at a mechanical disadvantage. My kick didn't move you backward, it didn't need to. I removed the structural support, and your own weight became the force that toppled you." Yuki listened intently, nodding. For a woman who had lived her life mastering sheer power and weight-based technique, this concept was revolutionary. It wasn't a critique of sumo, it was an addition, a new lens to view strength, leverage, and biomechanics. She asked, "Could I learn this? Not for competition against you, but for understanding." "That's exactly why we study martial arts, not to prove one style is better than another, but to understand principles that work regardless of style. Your sumo techniques are phenomenal, but if you understand the underlying mechanics, even a fraction of your own power can be amplified or redirected in ways you never imagined." The conversation lasted well into the evening, with both fighters dissecting movements, timing, and the physics of combat. Yuki's respect for Bruce grew not as an opponent, but as a teacher who had demonstrated something fundamental. Size is not absolute, technique is universal, and timing is everything. Outside the arena, the media frenzy continued. Headlines screamed about the impossible kick and the spectacle of a 135-pound man knocking down a 450-pound champion. Some critics accused it of being staged, others claimed it violated the sanctity of sumo tradition. Yet the video evidence, analyzed frame by Japanese sports scientists, confirmed the truth.
Bruce's strike was pure science applied in real time. Heel velocity exceeded 50 feet per second, generating over 1,100 pounds of force concentrated on a single point, delivered at the exact angle to compromise structural support. For Yuki, the match became a pivotal moment in her career. She continued competing in women's sumo, retiring undefeated at 252 wins, but she incorporated Bruce's teachings into her own training. She emphasized not just mass and power, but awareness of balance, leverage, and the biomechanical principles that could elevate even traditional techniques to unprecedented levels. Her legacy expanded from domination in the ring to education, inspiring a new generation of sumo wrestlers to combine strength with scientific understanding. For Bruce, the fight was a demonstration of principles he would teach for years. He emphasized that mastery didn't rely on brute force, but on observation, timing, and correct application. The Kokugan match became a teaching example in martial arts schools worldwide, not for its spectacle alone, but for the lessons embedded in that 1.3-second strike. Even decades later, the footage remained iconic. Slow-motion analysis revealed every detail of the technique, the rotation, the alignment, the microseconds of timing that transformed physics into martial artistry. The Japanese Sports Science Institute preserved it as an educational resource, showing students how the kinetic chain, combined with an understanding of structural vulnerabilities, could produce outcomes once thought impossible. What began as an unusual exhibition, a challenge of East versus West, ended as something far greater, a testament to the universality of martial principles, the power of learning, and the respect two masters can hold for one another. The arena may have emptied, but the lesson lingered in the minds of every fighter, student, and spectator who witnessed it.
In the weeks after the Kokugan match, the world of martial arts buzzed with discussions of that 1.3-second strike. Journalists, students, and fans debated what had happened, but for scientists, it became a case study. The Japanese Sports Science Institute obtained high-speed footage and began rigorous analysis. Frame by frame, they examined Bruce's rotation, hip alignment, heel trajectory, and timing. They calculated velocity, force, and impact angles, confirming that Bruce had generated over 1,100 pounds of concentrated force. What fascinated scientists most was the precision. Bruce's mass alone, 135 pounds, would never have been sufficient to knock over 450 pounds, but by exploiting Yuki's committed forward weight and timing the strike at a moment of structural vulnerability, he created an effect that defied expectations. Force equals mass times acceleration. Bruce had maximized acceleration and targeted the mechanical weak point with absolute accuracy. It was physics applied in real combat, not theory. Bruce, meanwhile, used the fight as a teaching example. In his classes, he replayed the match for students, emphasizing observation over brute force. "You do not need to be the biggest to be effective," he explained. "You need to understand timing, leverage, and the mechanics of your opponent. Force is not just a product of size, it's a product of knowledge applied in motion." Students marveled as he demonstrated how subtle adjustments in stance, hip rotation, and weight distribution could amplify power far beyond what mere strength allowed. Yuki's perspective evolved as well. Traditionally, her training had relied on mass, momentum, and the raw power of sumo technique. After her encounter with Bruce, she began integrating biomechanical concepts into her regimen. She studied angles, leverage, and the micro-moments when balance could be disrupted. Her strikes became more calculated, her movements more efficient. She still relied on her size, but she now understood how physics could enhance it, allowing her to anticipate vulnerabilities in opponents and exploit timing with precision. Her students noticed the difference. Yuki's post-1970 training sessions emphasized observation,
reading movement, and understanding how force flows through the human body. She taught them not to rely solely on brute strength, but to combine traditional sumo principles with modern biomechanics. Her reputation as a tactician grew alongside her physical dominance, inspiring a new generation of female sumo wrestlers to think beyond size alone. Meanwhile, scientists continued to study the kick itself. High-speed analysis showed Bruce's heel traveling at over 50 feet per second at impact, concentrated on a surface smaller than a postage stamp, striking just above Yuki's knee. The footage became an educational resource, demonstrating optimal kinetic chain usage in martial arts striking. Universities, research labs, and martial arts academies used it to illustrate how rotational force, alignment, and timing could create outcomes previously thought impossible. The match also changed perceptions within martial arts communities. Eastern and Western schools, once largely separate, began sharing knowledge more openly. Bruce had shown that principles from Wing Chun and Jeet Kune Do could coexist with sumo strategies, each enhancing understanding of force, timing, and mechanics. Martial arts were no longer just about tradition or culture. They were about universal principles that anyone could study and apply. For Yuki, the fight became a defining moment in her career and her teaching. She retired undefeated in 1973, but her legacy extended beyond victories. She became an ambassador for women's sumo and a pioneer in applying scientific principles to traditional martial arts. Bruce's influence lingered in her instruction, reinforcing the idea that knowledge, observation, and precise application could transform even the most formidable strength into controllable, predictable outcomes. Even decades later, the 1.3-second kick remained legendary, a perfect example of how mastery, physics, and timing could defy assumptions. Bruce Lee and Tanaka Yuki's brief encounter at Kokugikan was no mere spectacle. It was a lesson that resonated with fighters, scientists, and spectators alike. Power alone does not win battles. Understanding does.
The news of Bruce Lee's 1.3-second strike traveled far beyond Tokyo. Martial arts magazines in Hong Kong, the United States, and Europe carried headlines about the impossible kick. Martial artists debated endlessly. How could a 13-pound man topple a 450-pound champion? Skeptics questioned the legitimacy, while experts dissected the footage, replaying the sequence thousands of times in slow motion. Yet the truth was clear. It was not luck, nor gimmick, nor theatrics. It was a perfect application of biomechanics, timing, and observation. A demonstration of applied physics in motion. In the years that followed, Bruce's match at Kokugikan became more than a legendary moment. It became a teaching tool, an enduring example in martial arts education. Wing Chun, Jeet Kune Do, Sumo, Karate, and other martial arts systems incorporated lessons from the encounter into their curricula. Instructors emphasized that size alone was not determinative. Understanding an opponent's balance, weight distribution, and structural vulnerabilities could turn the tide of any confrontation. Bruce's principles resonated with fighters across disciplines. Observation, timing, and precise application could overcome seemingly impossible odds. Meanwhile, Yuki's fame grew internationally. Though she retired undefeated in 1973, her influence extended far beyond Japan. She lectured and demonstrated women's sumo in workshops worldwide, incorporating biomechanical insights from her encounter with Bruce Lee. Students learned that strength and size, while formidable, were enhanced when combined with awareness, timing, and physics. Yuki became a pioneer, showing that traditional martial arts could evolve without losing respect for their origins. The fight also reshaped perceptions of women in combat sports.
Yuki's skill, combined with her willingness to face Bruce Lee on an equal footing, challenged stereotypes and inspired female athletes everywhere. She demonstrated that intelligence, strategy, and understanding could complement raw power, redefining what it meant to be a champion. Her influence encouraged other women to pursue combat sports seriously, blending tradition with modern science. At the same time, scientists continued to analyze the footage decades later. The Japanese Sports Science Institute preserved the original high-speed recordings as a model of optimal force generation. Students, researchers, and instructors studied the precise alignment of Bruce's hips, torso, and heel, calculating angles, torque, and acceleration. The data became foundational for modern martial arts biomechanics, influencing training programs for fighters, athletes, and even military personnel. The match proved that scientific principles could coexist with tradition, and that understanding the body's mechanics could amplify human potential. The global martial arts community recognized that Kokugan was more than a single event. It was a watershed moment, a demonstration that style, culture, and physical differences could converge in a way that transcended expectation. Bruce Lee and Tanaka Yuki did not merely compete, they taught the world that martial arts are as much about knowledge and observation as they are about strength. Even Hollywood took notice. Bruce's reputation skyrocketed, bolstering his upcoming film, The Big Boss. The match provided a compelling narrative, skill overcoming size, intellect complementing strength, science meeting tradition. Interviews, magazine features, and television segments highlighted the unique spectacle of that day, turning Kokugan into a symbol of martial excellence. By 1980, scholars and instructors were still referencing the fight, analyzing its lessons, and applying its principles. It was no longer just a spectacle, it had become a blueprint for understanding the universal mechanics of combat. Martial artists, regardless of style or weight class, looked to Kokugan as proof that preparation, observation, and precise application could overcome any physical disadvantage. In short, the impact of 1.3 seconds at Kokugan extended far beyond a single arena in Tokyo. It resonated worldwide, reshaping martial arts philosophy, inspiring athletes, and merging tradition with scientific insight in ways that continue to influence fighters today.
Decades have passed since September 15, 1970, yet the echoes of Kokugan still resonate in martial arts circles worldwide. That single 1.3-second kick, delivered by a 135-pound Bruce Lee to topple a 450-pound Tanaka Yuki, became more than a moment of spectacle. It became a lesson in precision, timing, and understanding. It proved that mastery of principles could defy assumptions about size, strength, and physical limits. For Bruce, the match reinforced his philosophy. Martial arts are a science as much as an art. Technique, observation, and timing can compensate for any perceived disadvantage. In classrooms, seminars, and private lessons, Bruce used the Kokugan fight as a living example, demonstrating that the power of the mind and body in harmony could surpass brute strength. Students marveled as he explained how rotational torque, kinetic chain efficiency, and microsecond timing transformed a seemingly impossible feat into reality. Yuki, too, carried the lessons forward. She continued her undefeated career until 1973, retiring with a record of 252 victories and 0 defeats. But her impact extended beyond the ring. As a teacher and mentor, she incorporated biomechanical principles into traditional sumo instruction, blending centuries-old techniques with modern scientific understanding. Her approach influenced a new generation of female sumo wrestlers, encouraging them to think critically about balance, leverage, and timing. Yuki's legacy became not only one of strength, but also of intelligence and adaptation. The match also reshaped the perception of martial arts internationally. It blurred the lines between East and West, tradition and innovation, size and technique. Martial artists across the globe studied Kokugan footage to understand the physics behind Bruce's strike, the precision in timing, and the structural vulnerability he exploited. The Japanese Sports Science Institute preserved the recordings as a case study in optimal kinetic chain usage, using it to educate fighters, researchers, and instructors on the potential of applied biomechanics in combat. For spectators and martial arts enthusiasts, the fight became legendary not just for its visual impact, but for its intellectual depth. It demonstrated that combat is more than power. It's observation, strategy, and understanding. The principles applied by Bruce Lee at Kokugan remain relevant today, transcending styles, disciplines, and even centuries. Students of martial arts continue to study the fight to this day, analyzing its lessons and applying them in training, competition, and self-defense. Even popular culture recognized the significance. Bruce's upcoming film, The Big Boss, benefited from his growing reputation as a martial arts innovator, capable of feats that defied conventional expectations. Yet beyond fame and media attention, Kokugan left a deeper imprint. It validated the idea that knowledge and precision could equal or exceed raw physicality, that technique and science could amplify human capability in ways once thought impossible. The enduring legacy of Kokugan lies in its universality. Weight classes, gender, fighting styles all became secondary to understanding principles. Bruce Lee and Tanaka Yuki, through a brief but historic encounter, illustrated that combat is governed not by size alone, but by the intelligent application of physics, timing, and awareness. The 1.3-second kick remains a benchmark, a symbol of mastery where intellect and training intersect to overcome the impossible. For students, instructors, and fans, the lesson is timeless. The human body is a tool. Knowledge and technique shape its potential. And in the heart of the Kokugan, on a September day in 1970, the impossible became real, not through luck, but through understanding, precision, and respect between two masters who elevated martial arts forever.